I want you to picture the sound first. Ice cubes rattling against glass, then a wall of freezing water hitting my face while I lay curled on the hardwood floor, burning with a fever of 102.4 degrees. That sound is the last thing I remember before everything in my life quietly, permanently changed. My name is Meredith Hale, and within a matter of days I would own nothing my husband could touch, and he would own nothing at all. I had spent the entire day before New Year's Eve on my feet, cooking for a small army. Crab dip, a standing rib roast, bacon-wrapped scallops, glass after glass of wine poured for guests who never once asked if I needed help. By midnight, I could barely breathe. Every inhale felt like a towel twisting around my ribs. I told myself it was exhaustion. I was wrong. It was pneumonia creeping into my lungs while I smiled and refilled drinks for my in-laws. My husband, Grant Whitfield, stood over me with an empty glass and a look of pure irritation. He told me to stop being dramatic, that nobody dies from a cold, and that his parents had flown in and did not need to watch me perform. I tried to answer him, but a wet, rattling cough tore out of my chest instead. His mother, Deborah, sat at the dining table packing leftover roast into containers, muttering about how slow and useless I was. His father, Walter, pushed himself up from his chair, red-faced from bourbon, and did not so much as glance my way. I begged Grant to take me to the hospital. He looked at his phone instead of at me, and answered by throwing the ice water in my face. That was the moment something inside me went completely still, the way a house goes quiet right before a storm hits. I heard Deborah in the hallway, buttoning her coat, snapping at her son to hurry or they would miss their flight to Aspen. Walter carried out a bag of liquor bottles, complaining about traffic. Nobody once asked if I could stand. Grant grabbed the suitcase I had bought him with my own bonus, the one he begged me to upgrade before his last business trip. I whispered the word hospital one more time. He looked down at me like I was an inconvenience on the floor and told me to get up, mop the apartment, and have it spotless before they returned from the mountains, or we would be having an ugly conversation. Deborah, already at the door, ordered me to pack up the leftovers so nothing would spoil. Then the lock clicked, and I was alone. I do not remember crawling for my phone, only that my fingers were shaking too hard to unlock it. When I finally reached 911, my voice cracked giving my address. The paramedics found me still in my apron, soaked through, barely conscious. At the hospital, a doctor told me that if I had waited even an hour longer, I might not have survived. He asked where my family was. I told him there was no one, because in that moment, there truly was not. For the next 2 days, I stayed on oxygen and antibiotics, drifting in and out of sleep while machines beeped steadily beside me. It was during that stretch, lying awake at 3 a.m. with an IV taped to my hand, that I opened my phone and saw a notification from my car's dashcam app. The vehicle was registered to Grant, but I had paid for it, and I had installed a cabin microphone months earlier after one too many nights worrying about him driving drunk. I pressed play, not expecting anything except footage of the drive to the airport. What I heard instead was Deborah telling her son that stubborn wives needed to be broken, that if he starved me out for 3 days, I would come crawling back grateful. Grant laughed and agreed, saying I had gotten too comfortable and needed reminding of my place. Then Deborah brought up the apartment, furious that a multi-million-dollar penthouse in Tribeca was registered only in my name, insisting that marriage meant it belonged to the whole family, and demanding Grant force my name off the deed and his onto it. Grant's voice came through clear and cold, promising his mother he would get his name added soon, explaining that once I got pregnant and had to stop working, I would be financially dependent and have no choice but to obey. Walter chimed in, suggesting they pressure me into draining my savings to fund a salon for Grant's sister first. Deborah threatened to disown me if I refused, sneering that I had married into this family with nothing but kitchen appliances and should be grateful they had taken me in at all. I sat there with the monitor beeping beside me, and the fever inside me was replaced by something colder and far more dangerous. Calm. I saved that recording to a private cloud folder and forwarded it to a secure email address, before I ever mentioned a word to anyone. That penthouse had been purchased entirely with my own money, my parents' inheritance and years of bonuses, closed in cash before Grant and I were even married. It was legally completely mine, and not one soul in that family had ever contributed a single dollar toward it. On the 3rd day, once my fever broke and my oxygen levels stabilized, I signed myself out against medical advice, still weak but clear-headed enough to act. I called a luxury real estate broker named Preston Cole and told him I wanted to sell fast, 20% under market, cash or wire only. He was stunned at the discount, warning me buyers would line up regardless, but I told him speed mattered more than price. Within 48 hours, he had a cash buyer lined up, a young family who had been renting nearby for years and jumped at the chance. That same week, I hired movers and gave clear instructions. Everything I had purchased outright, the refrigerator, the television, the mattress, went straight into a storage unit under my name, with receipts to prove ownership of every piece. Anything that legally belonged to Grant, his suits, his shoes, his belongings, I had carefully boxed, labeled, and left in the building's storage room, with written notice sent through my attorney informing him exactly where to collect it within 30 days. I photographed every box before it left my hands. Proof that nothing of his had been discarded, only set aside. By the end of that week, the closing was complete, the funds were secured, and the penthouse belonged to strangers with a little girl who could not stop smiling at the view. I checked into a hotel in Midtown, uploaded every document, every recording, every receipt to my divorce attorney, and on her advice, filed for a temporary restraining order against Grant and his parents, citing the hospital records, the audio, and the pattern of threats caught on tape. For the first time in years, I finally slept in a bed where no one was screaming for soup or mocking my fever. When Grant and his parents landed back in New York, dragging their luggage and complaining about parking fees, they had no idea their world had already ended. They rode the elevator up, punched in the door code, and heard only an error tone. Deborah pounded on the door, shrieking my name until it finally opened to reveal a stranger in sweatpants demanding to know why they were breaking into his home. Behind him, the apartment I once lived in had already become someone else's nursery. The new owner called the police. Officers arrived, confirmed the deed had been legally transferred days earlier, and informed a stunned Grant that he had no legal claim whatsoever, since the property had always been my separate premarital asset. Deborah screamed about missing belongings until the building concierge calmly explained that every item legally owned by her son had been boxed, labeled, and left in secure storage with formal notice already sent to his attorney. The three of them were escorted out like trespassers, and when Deborah tried to shove past a responding officer, she learned on the spot that the restraining order I had filed days earlier now covered that very lobby. That was only the beginning of what came next. Buried in the expense reports Grant always dumped on me to file were designer handbags and luxury cosmetics charged to his corporate card, shipped directly to his mother's address, along with an entire Aspen vacation logged as client entertainment. I mailed the complete file anonymously to his company's HR and security departments. An internal investigation opened that same week, and after several days of pulling shipping records, credit card statements, and interviewing his manager, Grant was called into a boardroom and terminated for gross misconduct. His file forwarded for possible criminal referral. Deborah refused to give up the stolen handbag even to save her son from prosecution, and later showed up screaming at my office building, violating the restraining order I had already secured weeks before, and was arrested in front of my coworkers. Grant tried everything to renegotiate, showing up to our settlement meeting thin and defeated, asking how I could let his mother be handcuffed. I simply played the dashcam recording again and reminded him that the penthouse had never legally been his to claim in the first place. Premarital, cash purchased, entirely separate property under the law. He signed the divorce settlement without contesting a single clause, agreeing not to pursue any claim to the sale, since none had ever existed, and agreeing to repay every dollar he had stolen from his employer under a structured court-ordered plan. His family sold what little they had left and moved into a rundown trailer outside a dying coal town, garnished wages chasing them for years. Months later, a call came from an unknown number. Grant, working overnight shifts at a warehouse, begged me to ease the court-ordered payments, insisting he was drowning. I thought of myself gasping on that hardwood floor while he stepped over me and told me to mop it up. I told him the payments would proceed exactly as the court ordered, then block the number for good. I felt no anger anymore, only a quiet, finished kind of peace. Real revenge was never about screaming back at the people who hurt you, or taking a single thing that was not already mine. It was about following the law so precisely, so completely, that when the door finally closed behind them, there was nothing left for them to come back for. If this story hit you the way it hit me writing it, hit subscribe and join the Revenge Tales family. Because next week we are telling another story about a woman who stopped asking for permission and started taking back what was always hers. One receipt, one recording, and one signature at a time.